Picture this, the Upper Alps, somewhere between Bavaria and Austria, in the fading twilight of the 12 nights after Christmas. The air is sharp enough to sting your lungs, the snow deep enough to swallow your boots. You walk alone through a village that has fallen silent, save for the creak of frozen wood and the slow whisper of wind against frost-covered roofs. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. A hollow sound, warning or prayer, it's hard to tell. You reach the door of a cottage dimly lit from within. The shutter trembles in the wind, and for a moment you think you see movement beyond the window. A shadow lingering too still, too tall, too patient. You blink, and it's gone. Inside, the fire burns low. The family sleeps close together by the hearth, their hands rough from spinning, mending, cleaning. Their world is honest, poor, and terrified, because they know who walks this night. You've heard her name spoken softly in the markets, wrapped in warning and disbelief. Some call her Perchta, others Perchta, and in the old tongue her name means the Bright One. A strange irony, for her light is the kind that cuts through darkness like a blade through flesh. She is no jolly spirit of winter cheer. She is inspection and judgment given form. She comes not with gifts, but with consequences. They say she returns during the 12 nights, when the boundaries between this world and the next collapse like ice, cracking underfoot. The villagers place bowls of porridge mixed with cream upon their tables, hoping to placate her hunger. A meager offering for a power that punishes neglect with horrors unspeakable. You glance at the bowl now resting on the wooden table. Its surface has already begun to freeze over. You know this story, don't you? The one where Christmas is a time for laughter, families, and redemption. The one where warm drinks and candlelight protect us from all that is cruel outside. But that is a lie. A modern spell cast to calm trembling hearts. The truth is far older, wrapped in gray fog and the silence of fear. Once, Christmas was the season of ghosts. This isn't the story they told you in the carols. This isn't about goodwill and generosity. This is about blood beneath the snow, about a witch who punishes the slothful, who rewards the diligent, who opens your belly if you dare to rest before the work is done. Her blade gleams coldly in the half-dark. Her justice is not merciful. It is absolute. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you believe that these dark myths, these forgotten winter truths, deserve to be remembered, subscribe to keep the candle burning in the night. Your support keeps this archive open, allowing us to continue wandering through the shadows of history. Tonight, we will trace her steps through the Alps. We will learn how an ancient pagan goddess became a witch of Christian terror. We will follow her transformation from divine guardian to monstrous enforcer. And we will ask the question that lingers still. What does she really represent? The punishment of evil, or the cruelty of control? Welcome to the echoes of the old world. To understand the monster, we must first understand the world that created her. Centuries ago, in the high valleys of the Germanic lands, life was measured by winter. The cold decided who lived and who starved. Farmers and shepherds fought not enemies, but the slow, relentless hunger that came with every snow. Villages held to their customs like a lifeline, obeying every ritual carved by their ancestors, desperate to please the spirits of the mountains. Among those spirits was Perchta, once radiant, once beloved. In the oldest tales, she walked in midwinter as a shining woman, her face pale as moonlight, her cloak woven from mist. She was a protector of women, especially those who spun and worked at night. But time twisted her. Christianity spread through the valleys, and the church could not bear bright goddesses of the old faith. So it dimmed her light, turned her beauty into disguise, her kindness into threat. The bright one became the witch. The people were told, "Obey, spin your thread, be industrious, or she will come." It was a new kind of faith, one stitched with fear. Perchta became a symbol, an invisible inspector moving between homes, unseen. Mothers whispered her name to children who lingered in bed. Fathers warned that they had heard footsteps in the snow when laziness crept into the household. Fear kept the hands moving, the wheels turning. Step outside again into the night. The snow reflects a pale, unholy light. Up on the hill, a figure stands, tall and motionless. Beneath her tattered cloak, only one foot touches the earth. The other, legend says, is the foot of a swan or a goose. It glimmers white, impossibly clean amidst the filth of the world. It is said she carries a knife sharper than any scythe, and a pouch filled with straw and stones. For those who displease her, she knows what to do. Inside the house, the family sleeps uneasily. The mother stirs, wakes, listens to the silence pressing against the shutters. Her fingers ache from spinning flax. Thread still unspooled rests beside her. The rules say every thread must be spun by 12th night, or the witch will open her belly and stuff it with filth. The woman thinks of her children, their hollow faces, their dreams. She prays the porridge will be enough to satisfy the visitor. Outside, you hear footsteps on the snow. Not hurried, not hesitant. Measured, precise, one after another. The fire inside flickers once, twice, then dims. The air thickens, almost solid. You feel it now, the weight of the old world pushing against your chest, reminding you that stories were once commandments, not entertainment. For centuries, her legend traveled in whispers from cottage to cottage, crossing borders, adapting to languages. In Tyrol, she was the guardian of 12 nights. In Salzburg, the winter hag with the iron nose. In Swabia, the belly slasher, feared not as a ghost, but as a living presence. Each region added its own layer of dread. Each prayer sharpened her edge. But she was never only cruelty. Deep within the legend, there survives the echo of something divine. When she visits, she inspects not just the body, but the soul. She knows who has been faithful, who has lied, who has stolen or wasted. Those who are pure wake to find coins where the porridge once stood. For the rest, there is silence and cold. Imagine the night stretching long and brittle, the moon sinking behind the pines. You can almost feel her presence slip through the door. A faint stir of air, a scent of metal and smoke. The fire flinches, shadows contract. Her knife gleams. She bends over the sleeping form, her eyes reflecting the faint orange of the coals. She does not carve with anger. She carves with purpose. The next morning, villagers whisper of strange happenings. The porridge gone, the fire rekindled, the family silent. Somewhere in the snow are footprints that end suddenly, as if swallowed by the earth. The story will grow and twist across generations, becoming lesson, warning, folklore, but always it begins the same way, with that soundless approach in the dark. The fear she inspired was not random. It was design. In the medieval world, obedience meant survival. Women were expected to spin fast, children to learn humility, men to stay vigilant. Myths, like Perchta's, were tools of discipline, stories soaked in sweat and blood, shaped by hunger. The witch existed because fear was the only power strong enough to keep order through famine and faith. Even now, as you listen, her shadow remains. Every year in early January, parades still wander through alpine towns, masked figures draped in rags and furs, their faces painted monstrous, their bells echoing through the streets. They call these processions Perchtenläufe, the runs of Perchta. Some wear beautiful masks painted gold. Others wear grotesque visages with horns and red tongues. The people cheer, but deep down, the old fear stirs again. In her dual lies the truth of humanity's oldest superstition, that goodness must be watched, purity must be enforced, and laziness punished. The witch with the swan's foot was never entirely evil. She was the reflection of a God-turned-judge, her knife the instrument of a theology that believed in visible sin. She slid open not only bellies, but illusions, revealing what society preferred to hide. Close your eyes and picture her as she once was. A tall woman in white, her hair like frost on riverbanks, her steps silent but heavy with meaning. She stops at your door, her breath merging with the cold. She looks inside your home, your life, your soul, and decides. The candle trembles. The frost on the window blooms in quick filigree, and then she is gone, leaving behind only silence and a bowl of empty air. When you open your eyes again, centuries have passed. Time has buried her name under layers of theology and folklore, Disney and denial. We prefer our holidays merry, our nights bright, our stories harmless. But somewhere amid the carols and the lights, she lingers. A presence felt in the quiet moments when the snow muffles every sound and the world seems to hold its breath. Every culture invents its ghosts to explain obedience. Frau Perchta is ours, the specter of a time when virtue was measured not in kindness, but in toil, when the only warmth was earned through fear. She may have walked away from the cottages of the Alps, but she still stands behind every ritual of perfection we keep during winter. Work harder, clean more, be good, or else. Look again at the cottage in the valley. The sun struggles to rise, painting long crimson streaks across the snow. The wind dies down, leaving an uneasy calm. The door opens, creaking, and inside the children stir awake. A bowl sits near the hearth, empty. Outside, a single track of footprints trails off toward the woods. Not two, one, because she walks partly on earth, partly in the air, and she will come again next winter and every winter after. Until then, remember this: Christmas once belonged not to angels or saints, but to women with knives and wings, to spirits of labor and retribution, to the bright one who watches from beyond the frost. And when you feel the cold settling at your window tonight, ask yourself, did you finish your work as the others did? Did you keep your promises? Did you deserve her mercy or her blade? Close your eyes and picture it. A Christmas market glowing beneath strings of amber light, laughter spilling across the square, mugs of mulled wine steaming in the hands of strangers. The scent of cinnamon, pine resin, and roasted almonds fills the frozen night air. Music hums from every stall. Children press their noses to glass displays of angels and toys, their cheeks red with excitement. It seems perfect, almost holy, as though time itself has surrendered to joy. But this, too, is a magic trick, a sleight of hand pulled by the modern world. For centuries, the nights after Christmas were not a spectacle of comfort. They were the coldest, hungriest, and most haunted days of the year. The 12 nights stood outside of normal time, that thin border when nothing was quite itself. The cattle spoke in whispers. The dead walked under frozen moonlight, and judgment, it was said, came not from God, but from the one who visited with a knife hidden beneath her cloak. If you listen closely, the surface still cracks. Behind the cheerful carols, you can hear the faint echo of older songs, low, rhythmic chants meant to placate spirits that wandered the snow. Before the Christ child took the stage, the winter solstice belonged to darker forces. The wild hunt, the Yule goat, the nameless dead who followed ancient gods through the black forests. It was a season when survival demanded obedience to rules that no one dared question. Perchta's reign began here, among those fractured nights. She was the spirit who patrolled the boundaries of order, ensuring that humans respected the thin contract they held with and the divine. In a time before theology was written in books, every superstition was practical. To break custom was to invite ruin. And so her legend spread, half myth, half law, until even children learned that merriment could turn to mourning before dawn. When Christianity swept across the old Alpine world, it tried to replace these spectral traditions with doctrine. But you cannot banish the cold by decree. The church transformed what it could and condemned the rest. Their sermons called her a demon, a pagan remnant, a danger to souls. Yet her presence persisted, haunting nativity season like a shadow that refused to fade. She became the embodiment of everything unchristian that people secretly clung to. Female power, natural cycles, and punishment that came not from sin, but from idleness. And thus, a new contradiction was born. On one side stood the church, preaching mercy and divine forgiveness. On the other stood the people, still bound by fear of the one who slit open the lazy. The two worlds overlapped so completely that faith and terror became indistinguishable. It was this union, the holy and the profane, that created what we call today the European Christmas. The tree may now glitter with gold, but its roots are buried in blood and frost. Imagine those peasants, their faces hollowed by hunger, sitting through endless sermons about charity while knowing that the priest's come would not fill their stomachs. What comfort could sermons offer when grain was scarce, when fever took the weak, when wolves prowled just beyond the chapel walls? Only order kept them alive. And Frau Perchta, the bright one turned cruel, was the enforcer of that order. She watched when priests slept, when saints looked away. In this world, joy was a fleeting rebellion. The people celebrated not out of comfort, but defiance, singing songs louder than their fear. On the last night of the year, they banished the darkness with firelight. Hoping it would drive away her gaze, they drank, they danced, they prayed. And when the candles melted down to nothing, someone always whispered her name, afraid she might hear. You know her better than you think. Every time someone warns you to behave before Christmas, every time a parent reminds a child that Santa only visits the good, her ghost stirs behind the story. The modern myth of St. Nicholas giving gifts is simply the inverted twin of her ancient dance. Where he fills stockings, she fills stomachs with stones. Where he rewards, she punishes. Two sides of one moral coin, spinning between mercy and terror. The lie of the Merry Christmas is not that joy exists. It's that joy was ever innocent. For the medieval soul, happiness was dangerous, even selfish. To laugh too loudly was to invite envy from spirits. To rest when others labored was to announce your unworthiness to the Bright One herself. A peaceful heart signaled complacency. and complacency was sin. So they wove duty into decoration, obedience into celebration. Look closely at the symbols we still display. The candles meant to guide unseen guests. The feasts held to appease something larger than ourselves. The midnight prayers whispered against nameless forces. They are echoes of propitiation rituals disguised as cheer. Christmas was never born from joy. It was built from fear. Fear of the cold, fear of the void, fear of being inspected and found wanting. By the 15th century, chroniclers began to write about Perchta as a figure to be pitied as well as feared. They said her beauty had been cursed, her divine purpose stolen. Some even claimed she wept for those she punished, cleansing the world with her sorrow. Yet the wound of her transformation runs deeper than any myth. She mirrors the punishment inflicted on the old gods themselves. Domesticated, diminished, demonized. The Bright One became a scapegoat for humanity's guilt about its fading faith. The transformation also carried a warning for women. Perchta's commandments centered on spinning and domestic completion. Every spool of wool, every unfinished cloth became a measure of worth. The Church, eager to control women's faith, absorbed this moral language into its teachings. To be lazy in housework was equivalent to sin. The unspun thread became a symbol of moral decay, and the witch who saw it became both protector and persecutor. So as the Christmas story changed hands, from pagan to Christian, from terror to pageant, the moral stayed the same. Obey, produce, conform. The twinkling star atop the tree speaks of divine order, but it glints with the same cold light that once shone from Perchta's knife. The lie was never the joy itself. The lie was that the joy was given freely. Pause a moment and consider this inversion. How many of our modern winter rituals still carry the faint whisper of judgment? The clean house before guests arrive, the frantic shopping, the ritual of smiling through exhaustion. Each a thread spun to prove worthiness. We no longer fear a witch's knife, but we still fear inspection. The gaze has changed, but its power has not. The old villagers believed that breaking custom during the 12 nights would unleash chaos. Today, we fear breaking expectations. Social, familial, digital. We craft our image of happiness, polish it like silver, and offer it to the void. Somewhere, the Bright One smiles. She no longer walks on snow, but she walks through our reflections, reminding us that all order demands a sacrifice. If she were to wander the streets now, she would find no unfinished thread, but she would find us restless, compulsive, terrified of stillness. And perhaps she would say that nothing has changed. We still feed her every time we work until exhaustion, every time we hide the disorder of our souls behind lights and tinsel. Each December becomes the same offering, obedience wrapped as joy, fear hidden by a bow. In the heart of every myth, there lies a mirror. When you look into Christmas, what do you see? Is it warmth or duty, love or debt? In the dark hours when the carols fade, her reflection stares back, patient as frost. The Bright One waits for the moment when you finally stop pretending, when the laughter ceases and the silence returns. That's when she visits, not to harm, but to remind. Because despite the centuries of rewriting, the story of Perchta remains less about cruelty and more about truth. The truth that civilization itself was built on control, disguised as safety. That our ancestors feared chaos more than pain, disorder more than death. And so they built their festivals upon judgment, their happiness upon vigilance. The lie of Merry Christmas is that it ever belonged to peace. And yet, in that lie, there is beauty. The human will to transform terror into tradition, fear into flame, is the oldest act of defiance we know. Maybe that's why her story endures. Not because we fear her, but because we recognize her within ourselves. We are her descendants, shaped by the same need for forgiveness, the same dread of failing unseen rules. The next time you hear a choir sing beneath winter lights, close your eyes for a moment and listen for the space between the notes. There, in that breath of silence, she still walks. Her foot falls softly on the snow of centuries. Her gaze moves through candlelight and glass displays, seeing everything polished, finished, complete. She nods once, satisfied, or perhaps she smiles. And if you feel a sudden chill along your spine, it is not the wind. It is memory, ancient and absolute, reminding you that even joy has teeth. Imagine standing in a narrow, alpine cottage, the air heavy with smoke and wool dust. A woman sits hunched beside a spinning wheel, her fingers raw, her face a map of exhaustion and fear. The wooden floor creaks beneath the wheel's rhythm, a slow, endless turning that mirrors the night outside. Her children watch from the shadows, knowing that every thread she spins is a shield against something they cannot name but feel pressing against the door. In her lap lies unspun flax, pale as the moonlight coming through the shutter gaps. The deadline is approaching, the 12th night, when all spinning must cease. Tradition demands that every household finish their work before Frau Perchta makes her rounds. To leave thread undone, to sleep before the final spool is wound, is to invite disaster. The rule is simple. Diligence earns peace. Laziness earns the knife. To understand this, we must return to the medieval world's most invisible battlefield, the domestic space. Spinning was not simply a chore, it was a form of devotion. Every fiber carried spiritual and social weight. Women spun through famine, childbirth, grief, and prayer, their wheels turning like small altars to survival. Labor was virtue, and virtue was protection. Beneath this piety lurked terror, the fear that unseen forces watched every movement of the hand. In this fear, Perchta found her power. She became the personification of societal control, enforcing industriousness with divine authority. If the church preached salvation for the soul, she preached salvation through discipline. Her gaze fell not on the battlefield or the throne, but on the humble room where needles pierced cloth and thread bound the world together. Her justice ruled the hearth, not the heavens. The myth says that Perchta would enter homes during the 12 nights, inspecting the condition of the yarn, the order of the house, and the obedience of its inhabitants. Those who kept their duties found small rewards, coins or silver threads left on the table. Those who failed were punished in ways that blurred the line between allegory and horror. The witch did not kill, she corrected. She opened the stomachs of the idol, removed the lies within, and stuffed them with straw or stones. A grotesque anatomy lesson in moral order. To the modern ear, this sounds like madness. But to a peasant trapped between church and starvation, it was a law of logic. The body symbolized the home, the stomach, the hearth. To neglect the hearth was to invite rot. To neglect labor was to allow decay. In cutting open the lazy, Perchta purified the world. Her violence, though horrifying, mirrored the purification rituals of her time. Blood, straw, and stone were tools of cleanliness in a dirty and dangerous age. The story also reveals something deeper about gender and power. Men feared the battlefield and the tax collector. Women feared the domestic gods who watched their every breath. The female body was both sacred and suspect, its productivity tied directly to moral worth. A clean floor and a completed spool were signs of virtue. A single thread left unfinished could condemn a soul. Under these conditions, labor ceased to be work. It became a confession. Religion absorbed and sanctified this fear. Priests told wives that cleanliness was godliness, that idle hands were a devil's workshop, that the home was a mirror of heaven itself. But beneath these sermons lay an older voice, quieter and crueler, the whisper of Perchta. She lingered as the enforcer of invisible economies, punishing not only sloth, but autonomy. To rest was to rebel. To be imperfect was to invite inspection. Imagine the tension these women carried. Their daily existence oscillated between worship and dread. They were told to labor with joy, yet reminded constantly that failure would bring not forgiveness, but disembowelment. The spinning wheel became a symbol of both creation and captivity. It offered agency, the power to feed the family, and simultaneously enforced submission to an unrelenting ideal. When night deepened and frost climbed the windows, they told stories while spinning. Tales of unseen figures crossing the snow, of footsteps pausing outside, of bellies opened for neglect. The stories had rhythm, matching the hum of the flax wheel. Children would listen, their small eyes reflecting the flicker of the flame, learning early that work meant safety. By dawn, fear had stitched itself into their bones. Every generation added new punishments, new details to make the story sharper. Some said that Perchta's knife gleamed like ice beneath the firelight. Others claimed she carried a bowl in which she measured human worth, weighing laziness as though it were a physical thing. Her justice was cruel because life was cruel. Her violence made sense because everything else made less. In a world without security, control became the only comfort. The tradition of spinning took on communal meaning. Entire villages would work late into the night before Christmas Eve, singing old work songs to keep rhythm and ward off fatigue. These gatherings were not celebrations, but endurance rituals, proof that they were still worthy of mercy. When exhaustion made their hands tremble, someone always reminded them, Perchta watches. Her eyes see through walls. Her patience is the edge of the blade. There is irony here, because Perchta herself may once have been the goddess of spinning. In older myths, she was a patron of domestic arts, blessing the diligent and guiding the hands of women. What began as reverence decayed into fear, transforming generosity into tyranny. The spinning goddess became the spinning inspector. Every revolution of the wheel echoed her descent from divinity to vigilance. The punishment of filling bellies with straw might once have been purely symbolic. It represented the idea that sloth made a person hollow, their insides empty of purpose or morality. But symbols have teeth. Over centuries, those parables turned to warnings told with such conviction that listeners could almost feel the knife slide between their ribs. Fear turned metaphor into memory. The obsession with work, born from this legend, has survived far beyond the Alps. Even now, we glorify productivity, measuring our worth by exhaustion. The myth of Perchta lives quietly within the modern cult of efficiency. We no longer fear her knife, but we do fear her judgment. The idea that to rest is to fail, to stop is to fall behind. The thread has changed from flax to code, from cloth to data, yet it binds us just the same. Perchta's story thus reveals not a monster, but a mechanism. She is the embodiment of every system that disguises control as virtue. Her inspection of spun thread mirrors the endless evaluations we still impose upon ourselves. The workplace review, the spotless home, the curated life. They all whisper the same command: finish your work or be unworthy. Picture again the woman at her wheel, her eyes sunken but alert. Outside, snow drifts against the cottage walls. The wind moans through the chimney like a distant warning. Her fingers move on autopilot, driven not by hope but by terror. When she pauses, she thinks she hears movement beyond the door. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's her. Either way, her hand returns to the wheel, faster now. This ritual of obedience defined more than personal morality. It shaped entire economies of medieval Europe. Through fear, labor became sacred. Through repetition, survival turned into liturgy. When chroniclers wrote about order and discipline, they did not mention witches. But they built their laws upon the same foundation. To keep the people working, they needed not only hunger, but mythology. The knife of Perchta was invisible bureaucracy long before the term existed. She punished unfinished thread because it represented wasted time. And wasted time, in a medieval world where daylight was precious, equaled sin. The 12 nights were a sacred pause, yet paradoxically, they demanded proof that humanity could not relax, even before the divine. The grace period was never grace at all. It was surveillance disguised as celebration. Through this twisted logic, people learned to police themselves. Women who feared Perchta became enforcers of her law. They inspected their daughters' spindles, scolded neighbors who gossiped instead of working, spread the legend as both warning and instruction. The witch no longer needed to walk through snow. Her voice echoed in every command to clean, every expectation to endure. Fear had become self-sustaining. In this way, the myth reveals its brilliance. It enforces order without force, instilling discipline through imagination. The monster at the door ensured that no one ever stopped spinning. Even the most skeptical participated, because disbelief could not warm you when the winter came. So they kept working, praying, and spinning until belief no longer mattered. The habit itself became holy. And what of the stomachs filled with straw? Perhaps that image hides an even deeper fear, the terror of emptiness, the horror of being hollow, useless, unproductive. In a world built on scarcity, uselessness was death. To have your insides replaced with nothingness was both punishment and prophecy. Perchta punished the lazy by turning them into the very thing society despised: the void within creation. When you step back from the myth, you begin to see its structure everywhere. The same pattern repeats through centuries. Moral panic disguised as piety, productive fear justified as righteousness. Every factory whistle, every clock, every unpaid hour carries the echo of that spinning wheel. We've replaced the witch with systems and metrics, but the gaze remains unchanged. And yet, even in her cruelty, there lingers empathy. Beneath her grotesque acts, Perchta demands something elemental: purpose. She forces humanity to confront its idleness, to fill the vacuum of existence with creation. It's a dark lesson, but one carved from survival. Because in her world, stagnation meant death. To move, to spin, to labor, that was to resist the cold. The woman by the wheel finally stops. Her hands are trembling, her eyes aching from strain. The last thread has been wound. The day is over. Outside, the forest creaks under the weight of snow. She whispers a prayer, not to God, but to the one who walks unseen beyond her window. I have finished. Please let me rest. Somewhere beyond the mountains, something shifts in the darkness. A door opens, or maybe a wing unfolds. The night exhales. She will not visit this house tonight, but she will be back when the next winter comes, when the threads slacken, when the fear of idleness returns. Because control, once woven into the human heart, is never truly undone. Picture a moonlit mountain path glimmering with frost. The forest breathes in silence, every tree heavy with snow, every shadow alive with presence. Between the trunks, a figure moves, slow, deliberate, cloaked in gray light. Her face is hidden, but you can feel her watching. The brightness of her eyes cutting through the dark like the first reflection of dawn on ice. The villagers say she appears in two forms. Sometimes she is radiant, her hair white as snow, her garments woven from thread so fine it shines like morning mist. In this guise, she is the bright lady, the protector of those who keep their word and their labor. But she can change in an instant. Her beauty disintegrates into rot, her skin sagging like old parchment, her mouth twisted into a grim rictus. One foot remains that of a swan, pure, ethereal, clean, while the rest of her body decays. She is both divinity and decay, walking in the same skin. This duality is not madness, but meaning. It speaks to the ancient truth that purity and corruption are not opposites, but reflections. The bright one and the dark witch are not two different beings. They are two states of the same force. Perchta reveals herself as the embodiment of balance, mercy wrapped around cruelty, creation wielding destruction, light coiling within shadow. To understand her split form, you must return to a time before Christianity sealed heaven and hell as separate realms. In the old Germanic world, gods did not divide between good and evil. They coexisted, their power drawn from harmony with contradictions. A goddess could nurture and punish, bless and burn, because life itself demanded the paradox. Perchta's beauty was never meant to comfort. It was meant to remind mortals that order and chaos share the same spine. When the church arrived, it rewrote into doctrine. The feminine divine, long associated with both birth and death, was forced into extremes, saint or sinner, virgin or witch. Perchta could not remain whole in such a system, so she fractured. Half remembered as a holy guardian of winter's purity, half condemned as a shape-shifting demon. The duality that once made her sacred now marked her as unstable, dangerous, and defiant. But the people remembered both faces. They needed them. In one face, they saw protection and reward, proof that diligence brought peace. In the other, they saw punishment and fear, motivation carved into myth. Together, these images gave structure to their world. Light alone could not keep them working, and terror alone could not sustain their souls. They needed both hands of the goddess, the one that gives and the one that cuts. Close your eyes and imagine her stepping into your home. One half of her face glows soft and silver, eyes calm, hands outstretched to bless the spindle and the table. The other half is twisted, skin darkened with ash, a grimace frozen in mid-cruelty. The air flickers as though reality itself does not know which version it should obey. She speaks in two tones, one voice melodic, the other deep and broken. In her presence, you realize there is no safety without judgment, no peace without pain. Her dual body also speaks in symbols older than religion. The swan foot, sometimes called the goose foot, connects her to ancient fertility goddesses across Europe. The bird's foot is not deformity, but mark of transition. It signifies her as a creature who stands both on land and water, both of earth and the beyond. It is her passport between worlds, the proof that she can judge mortals because she has lived among them and the spirits alike. In folklore, birds like swans and geese carried souls of the dead to other realms. They migrated across the edge of the known world, their flight a ritual of passage between life and death. By giving Perchta this foot, early storytellers made her not just a punisher, but a psychopomp, a guide through winter's death toward spring's rebirth. Her cruelty preserved the cycle. Her knife, for all its horror, ensured that the world continued to turn. But as the centuries passed, her duality was distorted into moral caricature. The church wanted clear lines between good and evil, and Perchta defied that law. So she became proof of the danger of female power. Her beauty was a trap, her monstrosity a warning. Folk sermons told that even the most radiant woman could conceal the devil beneath her veil. The bright lady was rebranded as the temptress, the decoy, the witch. This transformation reveals how societies fear what they cannot categorize. Perchta's body was a map of contradictions, divine and earthly, fertile and barren, beautiful and grotesque. She broke every rule of a world obsessed with definition. And so that world punished her by fragmenting her story. Sanctify one half, vilify the other. Keep the paradox, but forbid the understanding. The fascination with her beauty and horror became a mirror for medieval anxiety about women's roles. The ideal wife had to be industrious and pure, yet submissive and voiceless. Perchta embodied the rage beneath those expectations. Her face glowed with impossible perfection, but behind it lay the fury of centuries confined to hearth and thread. When she tore open stomachs, she tore open hypocrisy itself. Her blade was the scream of the silenced, carved into myth. In this reading, her grotesque form is not punishment for sin, but resistance to control. The foot of a bird, the crooked smile, these are not flaws, but scars, remnants of her refusal to fit into the mold built by priests and kings. To be both divine and monstrous was to be free of their binaries. She could not be tamed because she belonged to both worlds at once. Artists of the early modern period tried to capture this contradiction, painting her with a beauty that decayed toward the edges of the canvas, half halo, half rot. The result was unsettling because it forced viewers to recognize their own split. Perchta was never just a myth about discipline. She was a portrait of the human soul, forever torn between creation and destruction. In her, morality loses its borders and becomes a reflection of necessity. When villagers spoke of her visitation, they described both faces as necessary. The bright one arrived when the home was clean, when the spinning complete. The dark one came when laziness or arrogance set in, but the strange truth was that they were the same visitor. The form you saw depended not on her, but on you. She was a mirror disguised as a monster. What she revealed depended on what you had become. It's easy to dismiss such legends as inventions of fear, but they carry profound psychological logic. In a world where survival demanded constant alertness, the idea of a being who physically represented both reward and punishment gave shape to internal conflict. Perchta externalized conscience. She was not superstition. She was self-awareness dressed in ritual horror. You've heard the saying that no light exists without shadow. But few comprehend how literal this was for those who worshipped or feared her. In Perchta, the villagers saw the full spectrum of winter, the death of and its promise of return. To witness her radiant face was to glimpse the distant hope of renewal. To see her monstrous one was to face the cost of that renewal. To decay was to feed the spring. As Christianity grew stricter, her legend narrowed. The radiant half faded from memory. Only the grotesque remained. The witch hunts of early modern Europe reinforced this deformation, turning her name into a badge of heresy. Yet, in the hidden corners of alpine villages, the dual-faced woman survived in whispers. The peasants held onto her balance, refusing to let dogma strip her of wholeness entirely. They lit candles for both her faces, the merciful and the merciless. Some modern scholars believe that the story of Perchta's dual parallels the transformation of human morality itself, from cyclical to linear, from coexistence to judgment. In the old world, time was a circle. Death fed life, chaos fed order. In the new world, time marched forward, separating good from evil, purity from sin. Perchta stands at the threshold of that change, both resisting and embodying it. Her two faces are the before and after of civilization's conscience. Her legacy endures not because we fear her knife, but because we recognize her contradiction within ourselves. We crave purity, yet we are made of corruption. We desire light, yet seek the dark. Perchta's gaze forces us to confront that duality without illusion. She reminds us that even goodness, when weaponized for control, becomes monstrous, and that darkness, when understood, can cleanse as deeply as any prayer. Stand again in that frozen forest. The figure approaches, glowing faintly in the snowlight. For a moment, her beauty takes your breath away. Then, as she steps closer, her face shifts, the flawless skin splitting into shadow, the perfection decaying like fruit left too long under frost. She looks at you with eyes older than faith, and in that gaze you see yourself, divided, luminous, condemned. The dual face of the witch is not a curse, it is revelation. It tells us that humanity's greatest error was believing it could separate light from dark. Perchta's truth endures because it cuts to the marrow of existence. She is every saint who sinned, every sinner who prayed. She is the mirror held to the soul on the coldest night of the year. She is the mother of contradiction, and she walks still through the snow, beautiful and terrible, waiting for those brave enough to look. Picture the heart of winter, the sky a slab of gray, the air too cold for sound. Smoke crawls upward from cottage chimneys, dissolving into clouds that never move. Inside, the villagers eat in silence, each mouthful a ritual against dying. But beneath their quiet, a different hunger stirs. The one that belongs to her, the bright one, the judge, the witch. She walks between the houses, unseen but felt, her presence heavy as the frost that devours the last traces of green. Her justice is not chaos. It is precision. Every movement she makes, every life she touches, follows an order older than any book. Perchta does not strike those who offend her whims. She punishes those who offend the fabric of existence. Laziness, greed, dishonesty, these are more than sins to her. They are ruptures in the sacred rhythm of survival. Her blade, glimmering like winter sunlight on ice, simply restores balance. She is not executioner, but surgeon. In her world, morality was measured through labor and necessity. A field untended could starve a village. A lie could shatter fragile unity. The medieval mind did not separate ethics from survival. And so the goddess of order became the enforcer of virtue. To rest before the work was done was not simple fault. It was betrayal. Her punishment, visceral and cruel, carried meaning deeper than death. To open a belly and fill it with stone was to make visible the weight of guilt. Every myth hides its logic. In the story of Perchta, fear served not malice, but management. She was the invisible hand of social control, ensuring that discipline ruled even when kings and priests could not watch. Her punishment perpetuated obedience. Her mercy justified endurance. She was the whisper that made a laborer rise before dawn, the shadow that ensured threads were spun until the 12th night. Her surveillance was divinity made domestic. And yet, her cruelty was strangely comforting. To live in her world was to believe that nothing happened without purpose. The storms came because one had sinned. Good harvests came because one had worked diligently. The cosmic balance was brutal, but clear. Perchta's justice offered certainty, and certainty is a balm to terror. She gave the poor a framework to understand suffering, and therefore a way to endure it. When snow covered the earth like a burial shroud, the villagers took solace in their rituals. They prepared offerings, porridge laced with cream, loaves of bread, or flax left unwoven as tribute. The food was meant for her, the unfinished thread a token of trust. If the offering pleased her, the household would survive the winter. But if she found the house unkempt, the work incomplete, her knife would deliver the lesson that laziness could not escape consequence. Such was her law. Even mercy required vigilance. Imagine the night she visits, a silence distilled from centuries. The door creaks open on its own, the fire dims, and the smell of snow fills the air. She moves like breath through the dark, inspecting every corner. Dust, disarray, disobedience. Her gaze settles on the sleeping family, and for a moment, pity flickers. But her justice does not command feeling. It commands form. The punishment is swift, ritualistic, as if she were reciting a prayer written in flesh. By morning, the world will be orderly again. You might recoil from her violence. But to those who lived beneath her gaze, she was not a monster. They saw fairness where we see cruelty. Her actions were an extension of the moral architecture of their lives. Hardship was the natural state of existence, and Perchta's law reflected that truth. A soft god would have been irrelevant in a world where mercy could mean starvation. The cold goddess was not their enemy. She was their reflection. In this paradox lies the essence of her legend. She punished what she loved, humanity's weakness, which echoed her own. In the myths that remember her, there are moments when she weeps for those she mutilates. Her tears freeze as they fall, small gems scattered on the snow. They say if you find one, it brings good fortune. Maybe guilt is the closest thing to grace she ever knew. Her justice, cold and unyielding, also reveals the psychology of control. Perchta's punishment was horror crafted as deterrence. It turned obedience into instinct. Children were told of her blade before they took their first steps. Women whispered her name while they spun wool through the dark. Fear, repeated enough, becomes filial. It evolves into faith. Within a few generations, no one questioned her righteousness because no one could imagine a world without it. Over time, her domain extended beyond the hearth. She began to judge not just workers, but souls. Her knife became a cosmic balance, separating honesty from deceit, effort from indulgence. The church, uneasy with her neutrality, tried to claim her authority for itself. Priests preached that she was God's tool, an angel turned punisher. But her followers knew otherwise. Perchta served no master but equilibrium. She was both the crime and the cure. In Alpine folklore, her punishments often spared those who confessed and corrected their mistakes. A woman who had neglected her spinning might find her tools arranged neatly beside her bed the next morning. An unspoken warning, not yet the blade. The message was simple. She gives you one chance to restore balance. If you ignore it, her second visit will tear the lesson directly into your body. Even in cruelty, there is education. Her justice also reflected the fragile economics of the medieval home. Every household was an ecosystem of survival. If one person failed, all suffered. Perchta, then, became the enforcer of community interdependence. She made individual negligence a collective sin. Through her myth, the survival of all hinged upon the discipline of each. Every neighbor carried her gaze in their minds. Every act of laziness risked divine inspection. But her punishments were not always physical. Some stories say she could alter the weather to teach lessons. A child who lied about completing chores might find their village buried under snow the next day. A farmer who hoarded grain could wake to find his crops black with rot. She did not need to appear in person. Her presence was the world itself turning against the guilty. Was her accomplice, reality, her courtroom. There is an unsettling logic in this. When morality becomes law of the land, the natural world becomes its witness. Every disaster becomes judgment, every fortune a sign of holiness. Under that order, justice feels inevitable and therefore invisible. Perchta becomes metaphysical, no longer just a figure but a principle, the equal and opposite reaction to human vice. Her knife is not punishment, it is physics. This worldview scars even as it protects. It breeds reverence for discipline, but silences compassion. It glorifies endurance, but erases comfort. The villagers lived righteously, but without joy. To be safe was to be afraid correctly. They performed goodness not out of love, but compliance. Their morality froze, like the streams around their homes, into something pure but lifeless. Such is the cost of control disguised as justice. Yet Perchta's myth endured because it worked. Communities governed by her law survived when others fell. Fear kept order where kings failed to. Her cold justice was efficient, a moral system immune to mercy's unpredictability. Perhaps that is why the story still haunts us. Somewhere deep in our lies, the same longing for perfection, for a world where consequence always matches cause. Her logic promises a universe that makes sense, even if that sense is cruel. And what of those who dared to defy her? Folklore remembers them not as heroes, but as aberrations. The lazy, the deceitful, the arrogant, all became lessons written into local memory. Their names vanished, replaced by the marks they left behind. Red stains on the snow, whispers of strange shapes wandering the woods. The story erased individuality, but strengthened the collective. In this way, she achieved something monarchs only dreamed of. Unity through fear, permanence through myth. But not all feared her completely. Some, the faithful few, sought to understand her. They whispered prayers that she might spare not for obedience, but for honor. They left gifts not of food, but of words. Songs about her light, about her loneliness. A few legends even tell that she smiled upon those who faced her without trembling. To accept her blade was to accept truth itself. For those brave enough, her judgment became, her justice still lives in the patterns of our societies. We no longer believe in witches that slit bellies, but we still worship systems that reward submission and punish rest. We call it responsibility, productivity, order. The names change, the function remains. Her knife has turned into invisible metrics, her gaze into the pressure of constant self-surveillance. We punish ourselves long before she ever needs to appear. The story of the cold judge is a mirror to our civilization. We crave structure so deeply that we mistake punishment for fairness. We prefer a cruel certainty over compassionate chaos. We build altars to efficiency and call them morality. And in all of it, she hums quietly beneath our consciousness. The whisper that says, you must be worthy to survive. If you close your eyes now, you might still hear her walking outside, footsteps crisp against frozen ground. She does not knock. She does not speak. She pauses only when she reaches your window, her breath fogging the glass in a single exhale. Through the frost, her reflection shimmers. Beautiful, terrible, inevitable. She does not need to ask who you are. She already knows. She always has. Picture this, a modern city draped in lights, its streets humming with electric warmth. Christmas advertisements glow from every window, promising cheer, perfection, family unity. The air smells of roasted chestnuts and car exhaust, old rituals buried beneath neon snowflakes. People rush between stores, clutching bags filled with proof of their goodness. The season of joy looks brighter than ever. And yet, beneath that brightness, something ancient stirs. You feel it in the silence between carols, in the fatigue that creeps beneath forced smiles. A presence that does not belong to this century lingers under the tinsel and plastic joy. The same cold gaze that watched the peasants of the Alps now watches through glass and screens. Frau Perchta has not vanished. She has evolved. Her knife has become invisible, her punishment psychological. But her judgment is still here. She no longer inspects your thread or spinning wheel. Instead, she measures your worth through productivity, presentation, perfection. Every unfinished task, every extra hour of rest, every unfiltered flaw risks her disapproval. The myth has adapted to modern worship, and its altar is your reflection. She doesn't visit through snow anymore. She scrolls through feeds, counting your failures in silence. The rituals remain, disguised as traditions of joy. The spotless home before guests arrive, the frantic cooking, the obligatory generosity. Every motion echoes the same command as before. Be pure, be diligent, be worthy. We still spin threads, only now they are digital. Messages woven for approval, narratives spun for belonging. And if we falter, if the illusion frays, we fear being seen as lazy, ungrateful, imperfect. The witch still watches from behind the glow of the screen. Imagine her walking among the crowd, unnoticed in her gray coat and snow-dusted hair. Her eyes catch yours for an instant, sharp and knowing. She sees you crafting your image, adjusting your mask, performing celebration. You look away, pretending not to recognize her. But she already knows your secret, that you are tired of pretending, yet too afraid to stop. Her story survives because it speaks to a cycle that never ended. Humanity replaced her rituals, but not her logic. The old peasants feared her blade. We fear each other's judgment. They spun wool to survive the winter. We chase productivity to survive irrelevance. The tools have changed, but the moral architecture stands untouched. The ghost of Perchta whispers every time a person sacrifices peace for performance. Work more, smile harder. Do not rest until the thread is complete. And so her legend haunts the modern holiday not as horror, but as mirror. The cold justice of the past has become the quiet pressure of the present. The old terror kept people alive through famine. The new one keeps them functioning through exhaustion. We no longer call it survival, we call it achievement. The witch has simply learned to wear our language. In the 21st century, she doesn't walk through snowdrifts. She walks through office corridors, through algorithms, through sleepless nights spent staring at glowing rectangles. She rewards those who meet their quotas, condemns those who hesitate, and leaves behind a subtle emptiness in everyone who tries too hard. Her presence is felt as perfectionism, the holy disease of our age. Her punishment is invisible but devastating, the eternal sense of not being enough. Every winter, we recreate her myth without realizing it. We demand harmony in families fractured by silence, joy in minds carved hollow by comparison. We chase ideal images, clean surfaces, and polished narratives, our own form of spinning before Twelfth Night. And when exhaustion sets in, we call it holiday spirit. In truth, it's ritual obedience, the fear that if we stop, she will return. But maybe she never left. Maybe she became us. The internal voice whispering that rest equals weakness, that goodness must be proven, that love must be earned. The woman who once punished villagers for unfinished spinning now hides inside the modern conscience. She's no longer a figure of folklore, but a habit of thought. Every anxious breath beneath Christmas lights is a fragment of her hymn. In that sense, her immortality is perfect. Unlike other myths, she requires no faith, no cult, no church. She survives in behavior. The systems we built to free ourselves from her control recreated her under new names: progress, success, productivity. We call it growth, but it tastes of the same fear that once froze the Alps. The snow is gone, yet the chill remains. Still, there is a way to hear her story differently. Beneath the cruelty, beneath the control, her myth carries a hidden truth: the human need for meaning through endurance. When the medieval peasants spun their last thread, it was not just fear that moved their hands, but hope that their work mattered. When we chase perfection today, we are driven by the same hunger for validation, the same desperate wish for order in chaos. Perchta's curse and gift are the same. She gave us the mirror of purpose, but made it sharp. To break that mirror, we must first recognize it. The witch does not vanish through denial. She fades through awareness. When we accept imperfection, when we rest without guilt, when we stop measuring worth in labor, we step outside her reach. Her justice can't exist without submission. She is the God of consequence, and consequence requires obedience. Freedom begins when we refuse her inspection. Imagine what she would say if she walked through the world today. She would see cities burning light against the darkness, endless noise disguising fear. She would see humanity enslaved by calendars and deadlines, praying quietly to machines. And perhaps even she would feel sorrow, because all her centuries of discipline built not peace, but fatigue. We outgrew her hunger, but kept her rules. She would walk down the streets at midnight, watching through cafe windows at those still working, still typing, still spinning their invisible thread. Maybe she would whisper through the glass, "The thread never ends. You have become me. Your faith in progress is my ritual, your guilt my law. You built the world I warned you about." And perhaps she would smile, not with cruelty, but with weary recognition. The student has mastered the lesson too well. Still, legends are stubborn things. They change form, but not essence. Each generation reshapes her to its needs and hides her when those needs become shameful. In some towns of Austria and Germany, the Perchta parades continue. Men and women still don masks of beasts and angels, some beautiful, some grotesque. They march through the snow ringing bells, half celebration, half exorcism. The old faith turned festival, the witch turned symbol of balance once again. To the onlookers, it's entertainment, a tradition of folklore. But to those who listen closely, the drums carry a deeper rhythm, the heartbeat of memory. The parade is an apology to her, a way of saying we remember the cost of order and the price of indifference. We no longer fear her knife, but we still honor its lesson. Every mask worn in those streets bears both laughter and mourning. If her story has survived this long, it is because it still describes us. We live between beauty and dread, mercy and discipline. We celebrate freedom while craving structure. The cold goddess merely reflects what humanity refuses to confront in itself. That our pursuit of perfection can become its own form of servitude. Her myth endures not because of her cruelty, but because of her accuracy. So, when the next winter comes and the air smells of pine and fire again, take a moment to listen. Step away from the noise, from the endless motion, from the illusion of control. Feel the chill outside your window. Let it remind you of those who once prayed not for gifts, but for forgiveness. In their silence, you can hear her voice, a whisper that is both warning and mercy. The echo of the Bright One still moves through the world, even now. Not as a witch haunting cottages, but as the idea that every action must prove worth. And yet, if we remember why her legend was born, not to enslave but to keep people alive, we can reclaim her meaning. We can turn discipline into wisdom, vigilance into rest. The choice has always been ours, though we forgot it under the snow. Before the light fades, remember this: she was never only a monster. She was a teacher, a reflection, a scar left by necessity. Her story tells us that goodness enforced by fear is not goodness at all. To honor her now is not to obey, but to understand. To look into her ancient eyes and say, "You are within me, but you do not own me." The winter may still come, but it no longer commands the soul. And when the season finally ends, when the last of the lights go dark and the cold begins to soften, listen carefully. Somewhere in that thaw, just before dawn, you may hear her wings, the sound of balance returning. Not punishment, not mercy, but truth. For in the end, Perchta was never the ghost of cruelty. She was the memory of what happens when we forget we are human.